Long before the major world religions took form, the ancient Sumerians had a vision of the soul so mysterious, so layered, it has largely been forgotten. But their insight was profound. They didn't see the soul as a single, unified entity. Instead, they believed in multiple soul components, each with its own function, destiny, and realm. To the Sumerians, you were not just body and spirit. You were a complex constellation of energies, each vibrating at a different frequency. The most important among them, the Z, a breath-like essence that entered the body at birth and returned to the heavens at death. But there were others, the Etemu, a shadow self that lingered in the underworld, the Giddim, a ghost form that retained memories and identity, and the Namtar, the blueprint of fate written before you were born. Each aspect of the soul had to be kept in balance through ritual, integrity, and awareness. And if they weren't, the soul would fracture, parts would get lost, and the person could wander in this world or the next, incomplete. These were not myths to the Sumerians. They were instructions, because to them, the journey of the soul wasn't a belief. It was the most important science of all. Stick around, because we're about to uncover the path they left behind, one that still echoes today. And if ancient wisdom calls to you, consider subscribing. We go deeper in every episode. To the Sumerians, birth wasn't a beginning. It was the continuation of a journey, written long before you entered this world. They believed that every soul descended from a divine realm carrying a sacred script called the Namtar. This Namtar was not just fate. It was a record, a set of energetic instructions, who you would meet, what trials you'd face, and even how you might die. But here's the mystery. This script wasn't fixed. Through awareness and ritual, it could be edited. That's why the high priests, called the En or Ensi, held such power. They were trained to read signs in the stars, in dreams, in the body's illness, because they believed the soul would whisper through symbols when it was out of balance. A recurring nightmare, a shadow that followed you when none should. To them, it meant a piece of your Giddim had strayed, or your Etemu had been offended, perhaps by an oath broken or an ancestral wound ignored. And if left unresolved, the soul wouldn't ascend. It would fracture further, haunting this world, or worse, forgotten entirely in the realm of the dead. Sumerian funerary texts describe this as a fate worse than death. To lose the thread of your essence across dimensions, which begs the question, are there parts of you still waiting to return? If this resonates, leave a comment. Your voice might echo for someone else remembering. And if you're feeling this journey, hit like. It helps others find it too. Next, we'll explore how the Sumerians used sacred rituals to retrieve and reunite soul fragments, bringing harmony back to the self. Stay with us. In the temples of Ur and Nippur, ancient priests practiced something modern minds might call soul engineering. They believed that trauma, emotional, spiritual, ancestral, could tear a person's soul apart. Not metaphorically, literally. The Giddim might get trapped in a location of sorrow. The Etemu could wander, restless, after a betrayal. Even the sacred breath, the Z, could become thin, fading before one's time. To fix this, the priest performed a ritual called the Nam-Lu-Zi, the act of soul reweaving. The ceremony was precise. Sacred chants were spoken in tones designed to resonate with each part of the soul. Water and smoke were used to dissolve energetic residue. A mirror, polished obsidian, was placed before the seeker. To show them what had fractured, they would ask the soul to return. gently, patiently, with reverence, because to command the soul was to lose it, and when the ritual succeeded, the seeker would feel lightness, memory, sometimes even visions of past lives or stars they once called home. Modern psychology speaks of integration. The Sumerians lived it millennia ago, and the message hidden in their clay tablets: you are not broken, just scattered, and all parts of you are waiting to be called back. If this touched something in you, drop a comment. Sometimes that act alone begins the return. Next, we uncover what the Sumerians believed happened after death, and why their vision of the afterlife was both terrifying and strangely familiar. Stay tuned. To die in Sumerian belief was not the end. It was merely a crossing from the world of the living to the silent dominion of Ereshkigal, queen of the netherworld. They called it the Kur, a cold, dim realm beneath the earth where no light reached, and the souls wandered in stillness. But not all souls were equal there. Those who died with their soul parts aligned, who lived with truth and completed ritual, were granted remembrance. Offerings would reach them. Their name would be spoken. Their essence would stay intact. But the forgotten, they faded, piece by piece, memory by memory, until only shadow remained. To prevent this, the Sumerians honored the dead meticulously. Libations of beer and bread were left at tombs. Names were carved in stone, not just for glory, but survival. Songs were sung on moonless nights to guide the Giddim through the dark, and perhaps most haunting, they believed that if the living neglected their ancestors, the spirits might return, not in anger, but in hunger. Not for food, but for attention. Even today, echoes of this practice survive, in candles lit, photos placed on altars, names whispered into silence. Perhaps remembrance is more powerful than we've been taught, and perhaps part of our soul exists only as long as someone remembers we were here. There are truths still buried in the clay, waiting for those who feel their pull. Now, let's journey deeper into how the soul was tied to the stars and what the Sumerians knew about our origin among them. The Sumerians looked to the sky not just for signs of weather or time. They looked to remember who they were. They believed the soul came from the stars, specifically from the Me, divine principles encoded in the heavens and brought to earth by the gods. Your soul, they said, was a traveler, born in the domain of An, the god of the sky, passed through the gates of Enlil, lord of breath, and embedded into flesh by Ninhursag, the goddess of form. But it never forgot where it came from. That's why newborns were held up under the night sky to remind them, and why the dead were buried with star maps carved into their grave goods so they could find the path home. The stars weren't distant. They were memory. They were the soul's compass. Sumerian tablets speak of Ze-Ana, the star soul, a radiant thread still linked to the constellations it came from, and in rare dreams or moments of stillness, some could feel it, like a song you once knew or a name just out of reach, calling you back towards something infinite. They taught that if you quieted the mind and listened through the breath, you could hear your origin, not as an idea, but as a frequency. And for those attuned to it, a strange alignment would occur. Synchronicities, déjà vu, a sense of walking paths already known. As if part of you had been here before, waiting for the rest to catch up. If something stirs in you now, let it. It may not be new. It may be a remembering. To the Sumerians, death was not a doorway you passed through once. It was part of a cycle. They believed that the soul returned, again and again, each time shaped by past deeds, ancestral memory, and celestial timing. But it wasn't random. There was a reason some were born under storms, some in silence, and others during eclipses. The stars whispered the timing, but the soul carried the why. They described this as the gubba, the standing return, a moment when the soul, having wandered through the kur, would find a new vessel, drawn to places it had unfinished threads, a father's broken vow, a mother's grief left unspoken, a forgotten purpose etched into stone, waiting to be reclaimed. Children born under certain omens were watched carefully. Sometimes they would speak in voices too old for their bodies, or remember paths they had never walked. Priests called these signs of zinam, a soul returning with awareness, and for such souls, ritual was essential, not to erase memory, but to awaken it gently, like fire coaxed from ash, because memory, if too sudden, could shatter the mind. That's why dreams were honored, why symbols carved on temples weren't just art, they were anchors. The Sumerians believed the soul leaves clues across lifetimes, a pattern, a pull, a face in the crowd that makes your breath catch for no reason at all. You don't need to believe, just notice, because sometimes the soul speaks softly through things we can't explain. Among the Sumerians, a name wasn't just a label, it was power, a thread that tied the soul to time, to memory, to existence itself. They called it the mu, more than just what others called you. It was your sound in the fabric of creation. To be remembered by name meant your essence still echoed in the world. To be forgotten was true death. That's why names were carved into clay tablets, into temple walls, into the hearts of songs sung by priestesses under moonlight. Even slaves had naming rituals. Even enemies, in some cases, were honored by having their names recorded, so they wouldn't become Nam Lu'ul, the unspoken ones. Because once a name was gone, the soul drifted, untethered. In the netherworld, these forgotten souls were said to become pale, thin echoes, barely aware of what they had been. But those whose names were spoken, they stayed whole. Even in death, they might guide, protect, whisper through dreams. And when a descendant called their name, during festival, mourning, or even a quiet moment alone, they believed that soul would stir, feel warmth, and know it still mattered. That's why they taught, say their names, tell their stories, not for history, for survival. And maybe that's why certain names, even today, make something move inside us. Perhaps they are not just names, but doorways. The Sumerians believed that everything we are is echo. The breath you take, once carried by another. The thoughts that visit you in silence, perhaps older than you imagine. They saw the soul not as a singular being, but as a symphony, layered across time, scattered across lifetimes, calling itself home. And the path to wholeness was not through escape, it was through return, to the breath, to the body, to the name whispered in quiet moments no one else hears. They taught that if we pause long enough to listen, to the earth, the stars, the stories etched in clay, we might remember that we are not just alive. We are ancient. We are luminous. We are in the process of becoming whole again, not broken, just dispersed. And through memory, ritual, and presence, we gather the pieces, bit by bit, until even the forgotten parts of us begin to hum again. So light a candle, speak a name, or simply be still under the night sky, because the soul, they said, always finds its way back to itself, if we let it. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needed to hear this today. Share it with them, not for me, but because the ancient ones believed knowledge only lives when it's passed on.